Hello. Welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn, and in this video, I'm actually going to start creating an album, and the second part of this will be concluded on the Not Too Shabby channel, and both videos will go up on the same day so that you can straight away hop on over to the Not Too Shabby channel and watch the conclusion of this mini album. In this first part, what I'm going to do is actually make the album base. So that's the cover and the pages. And I'm using this die set from from Paula Pascal, or designed by Paula Pascal, and she creates her albums in such a way that you don't need to actually create or make a complicated binding system. It's actually very simple. There are two dies. One die here that will cut the cover, and the die has been designed so that you actually cut this on a folded edge. So see how that line there at the top, that actually will not cut your paper. It just actually scores. And so I just line my album, or my paper, cardstock really, and I fold it. I put a score line, I fold it, and then I line up the fold with the top line of the die where the scoring mark is placed. And this die right here will cut your album pages. And it works on the same premise that you would cut a folded sheet of cardstock. But if you have a die cutting machine that struggles to cut through 2 layers of cardstock, which, depending on how thick your cardstock is, that could really be any machine. So it's not really just your machine, but also the cardstock that you're using. Then the die can be used to cut in one direction. See, mine didn't even cut through all the way. And then you would just rotate the die and you would cut it through from the other side. For the most part, though, I was able to cut through 2 layers of this gray solid color cardstock. You need one cover, and that's going to be it. That's both your front, your back cover, and your spine. And then you need as many pages as you would like to fill your album with. The cover die, it does put in some score lines for you. So you want to score at the edge of the cover. And then there's even an additional score line that's about 1/8 of an inch away. That gives you a little bit of a spine, a little bit of a gusset, depending on how much how much you actually filled this album with, and whether it needs a little bit more like of a gusset to accommodate for the thickness. And as it turns out, my album I didn't think would be very bulky, but it got to be a little bit chunkier than I would have expected for such a small album. Because if I just let the album kind of just sit without the closure, it sort of wants to be about 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick. So quite bulky. So here's all you have to do. For however many pages you would like to see in your album, you fold the cover so that it has this folded tab, and the album pages have a slot that is cut through the center where the fold is. And you just slip your album pages into that tab, that folded tab that comes from your cover. And then this piece here is the locking mechanism. So you slip that into that slot from your cover, and it prevents your album pages from falling out. I'm gonna double up on that locking mechanism because it's, well, for one, it'll give me a nice professional sort of that die cut finished edge on both sides, and it'll have the same pattern on both sides, which I like. So you don't have to worry about which is the front, which is the back. And but more importantly, it's so that it's nice and sturdy and substantial and doesn't feel wobbly as you are slipping it in and out of that. Essentially, the binding system of this is just sort of a lock and key kind of system. So that little folded slot there is sort of the lock, and the slip of that pink sort of locking mechanism is the key that you kind of insert in. And that's it. So that's our base pages complete. And I'm going to reinforce these score lines. I missed the score line that's right next to the cover pages. So you just want to fold all of those so that you get everything nice and straight, and then the fun part begins. So I've got well, in total 6 pages, but cut from 3 sheets of cardstock, the album pages. So all I'm gonna do is select my papers. This is from the Frosted Bliss 6x6 paper pad that comes in the November Not Too Shabby subscription box. And I'm going to pick a couple of designs for my front and back covers, and then I'm going to pick the papers for the individual pages. Now, I realized after the fact that you can actually use the die that cuts your album pages to cut a matte layer to decorate your front and back covers. But the first thing I thought to do was to just take the same album cover die, cut it out in one direction, flip it around, and then shift it so that it's a little bit smaller, and then use that as a matte layer. And as it turned out, this was actually a pretty close approximation to the actual page size. So either way, you can do this however you like, or you can even manually cut your pieces if you don't want to use the die. The reason why I use the die though is because A, you get that professionally cut edge, but B, you also get the stitch border detailing that the die puts in for you. However, if you were to manually cut this, it would be around 3 inches wide and around 5 inches tall. So if you just want to trim that in your guillotine or your paper trimmer, then you can do that instead. That's what I ended up with, but I did actually measure the size of the pages. And if you use the die for the pages, what you would get is 3 1/16 wide, as opposed to 3, which I got here doing it manually, and 4 15/16 tall, which when I cut that piece manually, it was 5 inches. So I got pretty close. I was within a 1/16 of an inch from what the die will put in place for you. So you can choose either way, but just know that if you use the page die, you're still going to have to manually trim off a small section, because remember, both the cover and the page dies, they're meant to be cut on a folded edge. So that means that 1 out of the 4 sides doesn't actually cut all the way through. It actually scores. It doesn't cut. So there's a little bit of manual trimming if you went that route. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is make the sort of a closure mechanism. So there are some dies that help you to do this. I definitely recommend, I 100% recommend doing this last, because the only reason why I did this first is because I was very curious to see how this locking mechanism works. But what I recommend is doing this last, because then you can actually position this so that you can make sure that your this little kind of closure flap, that it's long enough to actually accommodate for the thickness that your album will be. And you won't know that until you have all of your pages decorated. So I made the mistake of doing this first, and my strip here, the little closure strip, it's not really long enough. I mean, it's just long enough to go through to the front, but if it were longer, it would actually close a lot better than what it does currently. So definitely do this part last. the dies in the set, one will cut a slot for the back, and that locks in place your closure band. And all you have to do is when you glue down this decorative panel to your back cover, just make sure that you don't glue your closure band to your back cover, because that piece needs to move. And otherwise, you can be fairly generous with your adhesive. There's just a little bit of the closure band that's on the back there. And so I do like to put adhesive at least all the way around all 4 of the outside edges. And if you wanted, you can squiggle on a little bit of liquid glue too. I skipped that for this one, but if you're looking to make something that you hope will last a long time, then I definitely recommend adding some liquid adhesive. So then I wrapped that closure band all the way to the front, and I positioned this die, which actually cuts 2 slots. And the reason why it cuts 2 slots is so that you can weave that closure band under a bit of cardstock, and it helps to hold it tight there. But as you can see, I'm fitting this all with and completely, I mean, it's not completely empty. It has all of my pages inside, but I didn't realize how much this album would grow once I started to decorate the pages. And I'm gonna tell you, the reason why I didn't suspect that this would grow as much as it did is because I didn't anticipate using anything bulky or anything super dimensional. I didn't use any foam or anything. I glued down some mats and layers and photo mats and whatnot, but I glued them all down flatly, and it still grew by quite a lot. So it's very deceptive how just a couple of layers of cardstock can really bulk up your album. It surprised me quite a lot, in fact. But I think part of the reason is because the Not Too Shabby papers, they aren't papers, they're really a lightweight cardstock. So once you start to add a layer, 2 layers, it really, I guess, does add up across the it's actually not 6 pages in the sense of book pages, because it's actually 6 sheets. So it ends up being 12 pages. Here I'm measuring the actual pages. So this is 3 1/16. You can see it's just like a smidge over 3. And 4 15/16. So you can see it's a smidge under 5. So if you wanted to manually cut mats and layers for your pages, that's what I did. So I cut my mats and layers at 2 7/8 and by 4 3/4. 2 7/8 wide by 4 3/4. I just used my trimmer to cut mats at that size. And so for each sheet of 6x6 pattern paper, I can actually get 2 mats for my page bases. So I have all of those cut, and I was still short 4 decorative panels. And so instead of cutting into more fresh sheets of 6x6, because it does end up that you have a little bit of scrap left over, I just cut down my scraps into, about 1/4 inch strips, give or take. And it didn't need to be specific. I wasn't really measuring. I'm just chopping down strips. And what I'm going to do, I've showed this technique before. I am just going to make some additional panels that I can use, and I will then be able to save some of my paper, make it stretch a little bit more, and use up my scraps so that I don't have as many scraps left over. So there's so many different paper piecing patterns that you can create, and I decided that instead of making one large sheet that I would then cut down, I'm actually going to cut these panels to roughly the size of what they will ultimately need to be when they get adhered into the album. And that way I can really focus on each of these actually having a nice pattern, because sometimes when you make a larger sheet, you lose a little bit of the patterning. And so I am just gonna do a really simple quilted pattern. It's basic. It's kind of, I guess, a herringbone pattern, I think. I don't know the exact name of it, but this is my go-to for using up my scraps. All I do is I create a pinwheel with some of my strips, and then I continue to lay these strips orthogonal to one another, so at a 90-degree to one another. And then you can either apply these and butt them up right against one another, directly touching, or you can do what I'm doing where I've left a gap. And I didn't mention it, but I did line, what I'm attaching these to is some thin copy paper that I have lined with an adhesive sheet. And the reason why I decided to line some copy paper with the adhesive sheet instead of just using the adhesive sheet by itself is because I'm leaving a gap in between each strip of pattern paper, and I'm gonna fill that gap with glitter. Now, when I've done this in the past and I didn't use a sheet of copy paper underneath the adhesive, it was a little bit hard to position and use the panel, because basically if you were to only use an adhesive sheet, once you peel off the paper liner on the back, the areas where there's the gap, it's just adhesive and glitter or whatever you happen to fill it with. And so it makes the panel like a little bit weak, a little bit wobbly, and you could actually warp it or tear it a little bit. But by just putting a little bit of copy paper, it's thin, it doesn't add too much to the bulkiness, and it just makes it, for me, a little bit easier to position so I don't accidentally tear or make it warped or deformed when I go to place it. And it's just easier to work with, but you could save yourself the copy paper if you wanted. But copy paper is not expensive, so I don't mind using that and using a little bit additional adhesive. So for this first part, I am going to essentially just get all of my pages decorated, get the front and back covers are already decorated. And then if you want to see the finish of the album, pop on over to the Not Too Shabby channel. And that's where I'm actually going to complete the decorations with photo mats and ephemera that is also part of the subscription box of the month. And so my where I'm going to end this is I've picked out all of my papers. I'm grouping them in sets of 2 because I like to look at the pages as a 2-page spread. So I'm just trying to find pairs of pages that look nice together when you kind of open them up to those pages. And once I get these all glued down, that's basically where I'm going to end this video. And in fact, what I did was film this portion as sort of my preparation for a live stream where I was a guest on Tracy, who is Not Afraid of Color, here on YouTube. She hosted me on a live stream collaboration hop, and she chose as the theme for us to make mini albums. So I actually filmed this video as my prep work for her live stream. So if you want a little bit of a bonus, you can actually check out T's live stream replay. And I actually work on gluing all of those pages in. And then this is a sneaky peek of the beginning of the part 2, which is on the Not Too Shabby channel. I'll leave a link to it in the description box below. But part 2 will pick up here, where I've got all of these pages glued in. They are ready to be decorated. You can kind of see the patchwork panels are in here as well. And all of the construction of the album is complete. And now in part 2, what I'll do is add the photo mats. add the ephemera, add the decorative elements. And so I hope you'll join me over on the Not Too Shabby channel. That video will be live and will be posted at the same time as this one. So you don't have to wait to see part 2. You just need to hop on over to the Not Too Shabby channel. I'm actually going to use the Easy Wonder dies to make my photo mats and add the decorative elements. So I hope that you'll pop on over there and see how this album turns out. Thanks for checking out this video, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Thanks, bye.